All right, welcome back to another Cards player profile. We're going to be talking about Steven Matz today. So with Steven Matz, really what people seem to think about when they think about him is inconsistency. They say he's not a quality option, and they say that he doesn't even deserve a spot in this rotation. So people say if Matz is in the rotation at all, he's probably the 4 or 5. And they constantly relegate him to the bullpen when they bring in new starters. And they put him in the bullpen before they put in guys like Gibson and Lynn, which to me is crazy. I am of the belief that Matz is the second best starter on this team, at least ceiling wise. Josh, what do you think? How do you push back against these narratives?
No, I definitely agree. Those are the narratives. I think the narrative of him being injury prone is pretty fair. Like he's not a guy he's never gone over 160 innings before, and he's only pitched over 153 of the 7 seasons he's been in the big league. So like that's an issue. Or 3 of the 7 full seasons. He's had the COVID shortened season as well. But I do think the production wise, for the most part, he's been better than a back end of the rotation starter. So I think that's an important thing to recognize. Is he's not like talent wise, he's better than Lynn, Gibson, and Michaelis, in my opinion.
100%.
And then I do think because of the upside, you wouldn't move him to the bullpen because he's a guy that he can do something that only outside of Sonny Gray is the only guy who could really do it, which is consistently put up 5-6 inning starts or is giving 2 runs or less. When you're talking about those other guys, you're hoping 3-4 earned runs and maybe go deeper into games. He's definitely the guy you could see pitching in a game 3 of a wild card series if all goes according to plan. But again, health has to be there, and he did have some struggles during different stretches in 2023, and those are significant, the real things.
Yeah, he definitely has been streaky at times, but his production overall really does normalize, and it does so really well. I'm just going to read off his FIP from each of the last 3 years, which is sort of like ERA, but with a league average defense. So it normalizes contact a little bit. It takes walks into account, etc. So Matt's here over the last 3 years, including his time in Toronto when he was really good and people really liked what he did in Toronto. He had a 3.79 FIP, which is well above league average. Then his first year in St. Louis, it actually dropped to 3.78. Wow. He just got really unlucky. And then this year, it dropped 3 more points to 3.75. Matz has been basically the same pitcher in terms of the quality of contact he's giving up. That says a lot. He also had bad defenses behind him last year. Like the Cardinals' defense last year was terrible. I expect it to be better this year. That should help all of their pitchers across the board improve. You're also talking about a guy with Matz who, when he came back after being demoted to the bullpen, easily the team's best starter for a 6-week stretch. Over 6 weeks went, I think, like 6-0 or 6-1 with a sub-2 ERA, and he got his season ERA down to 3.82, by far the best mark among card starters.
Yeah, I think the Cardinals went 6-0. Like I don't necessarily think he did, but then he had 1.86 ERA, and he credits a lot of that to he became more comfortable with his curveball again, and he refined his changeup, and he started pitching with what he called more of an edge. Like he was just more confident in his stuff every time he went out there. I also think even with 2022, like he only pitched 48 innings. So like he had 2, I remember going back at this last year, I think he had 2, maybe 3 really bad starts where he gave up a ton of runs. And so it really inflated his ERA because he had this only 48 innings pitched. And one of them was like the start he got hurt in. So like, I don't really feel like that counts really for like, and anyways, so I even think like that ERA was super inflated for what it was. And if he had gotten 3, 4, or 5 more starts, he's more of a low 4s, high 3s guy again. So I think the production, like his past production has gone a little, like people have aired too far on the side of him 100%. As a bust. Like the injury stuff, he just has not pitched enough to live up to the contract. That's for sure. And then also like performance hasn't been there. Like the first half, he had to get removed from the bullpen or removed from the rotation, put in the bullpen. That's a problem. You should never have that happen as a starting pitcher.
For sure.
And then again, he did have some bad starts and got hurt. So like that's just the reality of it. But I do think from a talent perspective, in what, like if Steven Matz was available in the open market right now, he's probably getting that contract.
I think he's getting more than that.
Yeah.
I think so.
11 million a year, 12 million a year right now.
Yeah. 11 million a year for a left-handed option who is a 3 in most rotations. That's crazy good value. You're talking about guys like Chris Bassett, who in my opinion have a lower ceiling than Steven Matz, that are getting paid twice as much as him. That's crazy.
Yeah, it is. So like, Sandy, in your opinion, what does a successful season look like for Matz then?
Yeah, for sure. So I think for Matz, a successful season is throwing 150 innings. We were talking about that a little bit pre-show. Matz at times has been a reliable option. In 3 of his 7 full seasons, he's thrown 150 innings. That's a big deal. That's a guy who's out there making at least 25 starts a season. I think that's really what we need to see from Steven. Also, I think having an ERA or a FIP right under 4, I think that's another, really successful mark for Steven Matz. What do you think is kind of his, successful season?
Yeah, I agree. I think a successful season for Steven Matz is he looks like the second best starting pitcher of the current starting pitchers
Yeah,
available. I think there's a world where the Cardinals upgrade the rotation and add a guy better than him, and that's a perfect world for the Cardinals. Is you go into the playoffs with Sonny Gray, starter they acquired, Steven Matz, and you feel,
yeah,
and not Steven Matz isn't like, oh my gosh, Steven Matz is pitching. It's like, okay, Steven Matz, he's the third starter. This works. Requires him to be healthy though. So I would, if he's pitching 150, 160 innings, that's a win. He's not a guy that's going to get you 7, 8, 9 innings all of the time. So he's not going to
sure.
get you 180, 190, 200 innings. But 100, even 140 innings for Matz next year, I think would be a huge improvement. And if he's healthy for the postseason, ready to go in October, that's a successful season. On the flip side, Sandy, what does like worst case scenario or like this is like what Cardinal fans should dread from Steven Matz look like?
Yeah, I think there's 2 answers to that question. The first one is injuries. If Matz goes down on day 1 and needs elbow surgery and misses 4 months, like that's really bad. Also, Matz has been injured in 2 ways with the Cardinals. He's had a couple of injuries that have been real concerning injuries. The stuff in his elbow last year, for example, that held, or his first year, that held him out for like 3 months in the middle of the season. That was really bad. But then also he comes back and takes a ball off the shin and suddenly fractures his leg. And it's like, that's terrible luck. Unfortunately, Matz has kind of had both of those things happen. The flip side of that is he's healthy, but he just sucks. And that'd be a real bummer because it has happened as well. That happened at the beginning of both seasons. Slow starts for Matz are a real thing. He needs to start strong. A worst case scenario probably involves a slow start and then him not figuring it out, going to the bullpen and then staying in the bullpen. I think if it's September and Matz is in the bullpen, worst case scenario season.
Yeah, I agree with all those. I think maybe the spin I'd put in the worst case for him not being good enough is it's like they can't justify with the way they built this team having a guy that they don't know can go out there and produce. So like if he's mostly 5 innings, maybe 6 innings, sometimes big producing at a high level, so giving up 1, 2 earned runs at most, they definitely can play that. But they can't have a guy that it's like, okay, some starts it's 4 innings with 6 earned runs, sometimes it's 7 innings, 1 earned run.
Agreed.
They would rather have Kyle Gibson, Lance Lynn, Miles Michaelis eating up those innings, and they might give Zach Thompson a try at that point. So I don't see a world where he's like if he played a full season, I don't think he'd be bad in the rotation. Like I think he has the talent to be there. It's just they really like if he's another 5th starter, he doesn't give enough innings for it to be worth it for this team. He needs to be pitching like a number 3 that doesn't give a lot of innings because that's a different kind of starting pitcher that they don't have outside of Sonny Gray. What do you think, though, that Steven Matz is gonna like wrapping up this whole conversation? What do you think Steven Matz will do in 2024?
I think Steven Matz is going to hit the 140 to 150 inning mark. I really do. I think Steven Matz is healthy. I think he's hungry. And I think when we saw him last year, he was really good when he was actually healthy and producing late in the season. He was great. He was the best pitcher on that team. I think Steven Matz at the end of the year, we're going to be saying, wow, it was dumb over the offseason to be talking about Steven Matz as a reliever. He is the second best pitcher on this team, assuming they don't acquire someone at the deadline, which we really need them to. But I think that's where we're going to be. I think we're going to be talking about Steven Matz having had a really good season. He's going to have a surprisingly low ERA. The Steven Matz haters aren't going to be able to find any ways to hate him at that point. It's going to be good for the guy like me, who's the conductor of the Steven Matz hype train.
Yeah, and I think an important thing, like someone might be listening to this and be like, are they going to say every pitcher is going to outperform things? Like we have varying opinions on a lot of the other starters. We started Steven Matz because we think he's one of the guys that has just the weirdest narrative around him. And he's the guy that has like the potential to be way more than what most of the other starters in the rotation could do. So I agree. He's pretty much been 1 out of every 2 seasons pitched 150, 160 innings, and he's due for that season. He's gotten 3 of his 7. So he's due to hit the 4th, and it's 4 of 8. Of the full season. So I think he hits 140, 50. I think he's clearly the second most talented starter, second most productive starter from like an ERA, run prevention standpoint. And so he fills the role of the guy that can go up and shut out another lineup for 5 innings or give up only 1 or 2 runs. And then the Cardinals use the bullpen to cover the rest of it. When most of the rest of the rotation outside of Sonny Gray, you're hoping they go deeper into games, but you're living with the fact they're giving up a couple more runs, which in the regular season plays fine, but the thing to wrap up on Steven Matz is he's a guy you could actually potentially use in a playoff rotation. I don't really think people think that's possible for Lynn, Michaelis, or Gibson for the most part.
More. Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Yeah. And that's why, you say he's probably the second best. I think he's also the second most important starter on this team.
Totally agree.
The Cardinals will go as far as Steven Matz can take them. Not because he's more important than Sonny Gray, but because we know who Sonny Gray is. If Steven Matz, he's such high variance. If he's good,
Yeah.
the Cardinals will be very, very good. If Steven Matz sucks, it's going to be really hard for the Cardinals to win a lot of games because, like you said, the rest of the rotation gives you certainty, but not excitement.
I think the only way it's different, outside of, again, one of those certain guys ends up popping off in a way that we didn't
Sure.
expect, is the thing that you can't bank on, but is possible that one of the young guys comes up and provides that. But what Steven Matz does is he makes it so they don't have to look at Gordon Graceffo to do that. They don't look at
Yeah.
Zach Thompson to have to provide that. They have a stable veteran who can do that. But maybe one of those guys does. I feel way less certain about that than Steven Matz.
Yeah, especially because, as we'll probably talk about in a number of these other previews, those higher ceiling guys that could do that, like Tekoa Roby,
Yeah.
Tank Pence, those guys are just lower in the minors. But it's been
Yeah.
multiple years since the Cardinals had somebody come do that. So hopefully we're due for one. But if we're not, it's got to be Steven Matz. So thanks everybody for tuning in to another Cards Player Profile. We can't wait to see what Matz accomplishes in 2024. On your way out, make sure to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. We'll see you guys soon.